You are at your very best when things are at their worst. In this video, we'll talk about using the what if game that may complement your desire to protect yourself. We'll get right into that right after the channel's intro. You are ultimately responsible for protecting yourself and your own survival. Make sure to live your life with honor and integrity. Never take joy in another person's misfortunes. Always be the wolf hunter. Don't be the sheep and never be the wolf. A lot of people are Hollywood educated and do not have a true appreciation or understanding on how attacks and assaults actually happen. It appears that too many people have the idea that a bad guy will announce his presence to you and state his intentions well before the attack happens. Think of how many movies you've seen where a person is walking down the street and the hoodlums appear from a distance and immediately start showing that they are dirtbags by acting out and slowly closing the distance to the soon-to-be victims. Of course, if that happened all the time in real life, then that would give us plenty of time to come up with a plan while the bad guy was busy showing and verbally communicating to us what a dirtbag he really is. But the reality is that many attacks are sudden and violent. Bad guys are like anybody else. They want to get the best outcome for them with fewer risks. And when a sudden attack happens, many victims are caught by surprise and then are also extremely stunned and confused by the ugly violence of the attack. We always have to remember that when we are stunned, that when we are caught by total surprise, that being in a state of shock may cause a panic mode where we are unable to develop a plan of self-defense under such stressful circumstances. So having a plan already set in place will help tremendously should an attack or an assault suddenly happen. To help combat the possibility of finding myself in a dangerous situation with no plan in place, I like to play a game that was taught to me many years ago in the police academy called the what if game. Simply put, the whole purpose of the what if game, you are able to actually put a plan into place so that if something does happen, instead of having no plan where you may just freeze or hesitate while you come up with a plan, you are able to react more quickly and give yourself a better chance of protecting yourself. Now, the game is actually easy to play during your day-to-day routines. Simply look for possible danger and ask yourself, what could I do to protect myself should X, Y, or Z suddenly happen? More examples could be along the lines of, let's say you're walking down the street. Ask yourself, what if somebody with a knife comes around that corner that I'm approaching? Or if you're at home watching TV, ask yourself, what if I suddenly start hearing my front door being kicked in? Where's my nearest weapon to protect myself? Or if somebody starts approaching you in public, ask yourself, what if this guy who has approached me asking for directions suddenly assaults me and his questions were just a ruse to get close to close the distance in on me? Of course, in the police academy, the what if game was for situations like, what if this suspicious guy that I got a call on suddenly tries to throw a punch at me or tackling me instead of identifying himself? But being able to react quicker is better than hesitation, especially since action is always faster than reaction. Us law-abiding citizens, we are already at the disadvantage since we can't read the mind of the criminal to know that he's going to attack beforehand. So we can at least help ourselves by already having a plan in place should we be forced to react to a threat. Now, some things to keep in mind when playing the what if game when you're in situations where you could possibly be assaulted. One thing is called the OODA loop. Observe, orientate, decide, act. You observe the assault to begin to take place. You orientate yourself to react to that assault. You decide what actions you're going to take. Then you act. And the loop part behind the OODA is because during a fight or self-defense situation, you will be doing this over and over again with each action that's occurring during that encounter.
So by already knowing where you will position yourself and knowing what actions you'll take, then you have already removed two parts of that OODA loop: the orientate part and the deciding of what actions you'll take part. Another thing to keep in mind is that an attacker can cover 21 feet in just over a second. So you really have to keep in mind the amount of distance that you have between you and a potential attacker. In law enforcement, we realize that within speaking distance that an attacker will more than likely have our throats cut before we can even get our guns out of our holsters. So since attackers can cover so much distance before we can react, having your weapon ready to go may be optimal. Now obviously I'm not talking about having your handgun out and pointing at everybody as you walk down the street. But if your state law allows concealed carry, maybe you should consider having your handgun in your jacket pocket with your hand already around the grip, especially if you're in a situation where it's inherently dangerous. Because, if is there any law that states that you can't shoot through your pocket? You can also carry something else like a coup baton or some other small weapon that you can easily conceal in your hand. And while a smaller weapon like that may not completely stop an attacker, it may stun him for just a half a second. And this may allow you to create the distance needed to unholster your legally carried handgun or your other primary self-defense weapon. So to recap this video, use the what-if game to have a self-defense plan in place instead of freezing. Also remember how quickly a bad guy can cover distance and be on top of you. And how will you be able to deploy your self-defense weapons should you be attacked? Folks, just please remember that you always want to try to avoid confrontations in the first place. And please also remember that violence should always be a last resort and only used because you were forced to use it. Folks, if you found this video to be informative and useful, please comment below, and also please consider subscribing to this channel, as I plan on making many more videos down the road as time permits. Anyways, folks, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.